Hello everybody, my name is Roxtus,
And I'm Soulgale.
and welcome back to Warframe. What? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Alrighty, Loki How To. So, Loki drops off of Neptune, off of the boss here,
The hyena
the
pack.
Hyena Pack, on Phasmatane, however you say that, Phasmatane. You get all three of his components here, and you can get his main blueprint within the market right here. He's pretty good. He's interesting though. You really only use him when it's really conditional, when you really need it. It's more so based on his abilities and just kind of what things you actually need at the moment. So, shall we dive into the abilities?
We shall.
Alrighty. So Loki is a very basic Warframe. There's really not a whole lot to his abilities. This is probably why this is going to be very quick and easy to do for Loki. But Loki is more so just kind of a backstabber type Warframe, just a very basic one, very easy to read through his abilities and very easy to get the hang of what he does. His passive is he's able to hang from walls 10 times longer than normal. This equates to 60 seconds on his wall latch, which normal Warframes I believe have 6 seconds. So this equates to a 60-second timer when he's doing a wall latch, and that can last for a whole minute. So that's pretty good. This is pretty useful too, especially if you're doing some Nightwave missions or trying to hit an objective within Nightwave where, hey, I need to hang off of a wall and I need to kill a certain amount of units or something to that conditional where I need to be able to do this to complete an objective for Nightwave. That is pretty useful, but other than that, I really don't find a whole lot of the time where I'm hanging from walls for a whole minute. But it is pretty useful if you do get that conditional. Decoy. Decoy is Loki deploys a holographic copy of himself, drawing in enemy fire. Drain is 25 energy. Duration is 25 seconds. This is pretty interesting. Not really, because I don't know what to think about this. This only has 400 shields. This only has 200 health. And especially at higher levels, they just end up shredding it. There's no real invulnerability, as we see with other decoys or any other distractions that you can deploy. So because it doesn't have really any invulnerability, no health converted off of damage, and of course it has no shield gating, it just pretty much means that this is pretty sucky. It only works really kind of early level, and then after that it just obviously just falls off after that. It has 100 cast range though, so you can cast it from a pretty safe distance, but other than that, it's just meh. It's not very useful all the time. Invisibility, probably the most useful stealth in the game, especially considering drain and duration. Loki camouflages himself, becoming invisible to enemies. Drain is 50 energy on the base, duration is 12 seconds, and the noise reduction for how much you can get from hushed invisibility, which is a great augment to use for him, is 100%. So if you're having any firearms or anything like that, I would definitely recommend using hushed invisibility, because then your firearms won't alert enemies and you can get more affinity via this way. This is probably the better version of invisibility, especially because when you look at someone like Ash, they only have 8 seconds on that smoke bomb, and this invisibility lasts 12 seconds, so that's a 50% increased duration. The reason why this is so good is because you just drain a certain amount of energy, you get a certain amount of duration off of it, and then you don't have any of your movement speed reduced. The only other Warframe that has a very efficient and long-lasting stealth is Ivara, but when you're using Ivara, you get a 50% slow forced on yourself. So you're trying to move around the environment, you're trying to do it very quickly, and Ivara just really slows you down. So this is probably the best invisibility for movement and as well stealth and just keeping yourself invisible. Switch teleport. Loki instantaneously swaps between positions with the target, confusing an enemy. Drain is 25 energy and range is 75 meters from you being able to basically cast range and ability range as well. You just look at a unit, whatever you want to swap with, and you just hit the ability. It's pretty simple, it's pretty basic. And if you've ever seen commanders throughout some Grineer tile sets, or spaceships, you'll be able to see some Grineer commanders use the same ability as well. So there's not really any difference there. It's pretty much just a copy and paste of Loki's Switch Teleport. Radial Disarm lets forth a wave of energy disrupting projectiles from enemies in range and forcing them to revert to melee combat. So I don't know what it means disrupting projectile weapons, but it just basically radial disarms everyone. They can't use any ranged attacks, even MOAs. They can't use ranged attacks. Sentients, they can't use ranged attacks. They will refresh, though, that buffer, and they'll be able to use their ranged attacks again, so you have to just keep on reprocking it. With Ospreys, this is actually kind of interesting, because they can't use the ranged, but then they also fall out of the sky and become ground level so that they become easier to hit rather than trying to actually hit them out of the air. So that's really interesting with that ability. It's like it just completely disarms a whole bunch of different things. The drain is 100 energy. Radius is 20 meters on a base, and damage is 500 impact proc. This is dependent on what type of enemy you're actually fighting up against, and if that 500 impact actually hits the enemy. It's completely semi-specific on what enemies actually get hit with the 500 impact. You just kind of have to read up on his page on which enemies actually get hit with it and which enemies don't. It's completely based upon whatever system Loki is using. Really, it just depends what he actually hits with it. And there's no real way to say that he hits bosses specifically or he hits other units specifically. It just hits certain units that he favors to hit, I guess. There's no real indicator what he actually can hit with that or not. But that's pretty much it. As with each of these abilities, they actually do not say anything about casting time. So there's this decoy is 0.6 seconds to actually cast the ability. Invisibility is 0.75 or 3/4 of a second to cast invisibility, 60% of a second to cast decoy. Switch teleport takes 0.5 of a second or 50% of a second, half of a second to cast switch teleport. And then radial disarm takes 0.9 of a second or 9/10 of a second to actually cast. So it's interesting when you actually take a look at certain abilities and go, hey, you know, they take a certain amount of duration to actually cast each of those abilities, especially when you're looking at Necros though. Having an idea of how long certain things take to cast really helps, because you can get caught in a cast where the enemy fires on you and you just end up dying because the cast takes so long to actually pull off.
I've had that happen before as Necros.
Yes. So without further ado, shall we take a look at the mods?
We shall.
All right. So I have three different guys here. I have Affinity. This one is mainly for going around, like I've said, with Equinox and getting some really high affinity from the one tile in Sedna. So this is really good for affinity. Switch teleport is mainly if you're on Plains of Eidolon. We're using switch teleport to be able to transport our hijacked or hacked drone and trying to get it across the area to be able to fast forward our mission rather than just standing there and trying to wait for that drone to move around. We're actually just using switch teleport to just fast forward that drone to the location it needs to get to and just to finish out the mission as quick as possible.
Which
Basically,
is useful.
yeah, basically just speed running the entire thing. Volt doesn't work for hacked Hydron, so this is really useful for just speed running that mission. Invisibility, we are just actually with this build fully focusing on duration and of course invisibility, just to stay invisible as long as possible. That's pretty much it. The most useful one here though is going to be definitely affinity. If you are trying to level up weapons, anything equipment, or even if you're trying to level up your school like Namron, this is the build to go to, especially because of invisibility. Again, this works really well with Equinox's rest, being able to put things to sleep, make sure that you get that stealth multiplier, and then just get a huge amount of affinity buffer in your top right hand corner, and being able to build that up to that 5 times multiplier where you get a huge amount of affinity. And we will be showing off and showcasing off trying to actually do this. This is the best way you can actually probably use Loki within the current meta, especially with invisibility. Invisibility just makes sure that no one spots you, gets alerted, and you actually get reset, or if they hit an alarm, it just makes sure that everything's quiet, everything is smooth, and that you just get a ton of affinity. So with the affinity build, you can actually swap out, and I really don't really care all that much about the build all that much, but if I was actually doing this build, I would actually go Steel Charge instead of Corrosive Projection, Prime Sure-Footed instead of Cunning Drift. You could put something else in this slot, but I do love the full range, so there's no real reason to go either which way. The reason for Corrosive Projection is I didn't really spend any Forma on Loki. This is an unranked Loki, and I'm using it to get your affinity. So you can tell right away, I don't even play Loki all that much. And even for affinity, I'm recommending Loki because he has that invisibility, and it's very useful just to make sure that no one sees you and everything stays hush and quiet while you're getting your affinity. So even here, if I were to put a Forma on, I would do Steel Charge, but again, I don't really use Loki all that much, and I'll just take Corrosive Projection. But if I was doing it, I would put on Steel Charge for the added melee damage just to make sure I have a little bit more melee damage. Prime Sure-Footed here, of course, again, and range doesn't really matter too much which way you're looking at it, but we want, especially for Rest and Rage, we want as much range as we can actually possibly get. So we're using Cunning Drift, Stretch, and Overextended to just get as much range as we wanted to. If we wanted more range, what we could do is we could actually add on Augur Reach instead of Cunning Drift. Put Prime for Sure-Footed over here and put Augur Reach here. But again, I don't know about Archon Stretch. Is that the same thing as Stretch? Right?
It's the same thing as Stretch.
Okay, so there's no real difference in range there.
No.
Okay, so there, if that is actually the same, if it does add a little bit more range, I would definitely be tempted to put it into the range slot if it just adds a little bit more range. But the main thing here is we're basically going range. If I could, I would be able to put this. I don't have any Forma, but if I would be able to put this over here, be able to put Augur Reach, and I get 50% added bonus range. That would really help for Rest and Rage, just to make sure everything can't move. They can't see me. They can't see enemies getting killed around them. Therefore, they can't get alert, and therefore I can get a huge amount of affinity off of that. So that's why full range, you want to just go pretty much these three mods. Both of these add as much range as you can get, but adding a little bit more range always definitely helps. For him, we're going to go Primed Flow for maximum battery, making sure we have Arcane Energize. We're going to go full efficiency, making sure that we can just spam Rest and Rage across the tile. We really don't care too much about Common Frenzy. I've been using it off and on, and I find it's just better to just forego it and just to go full efficiency, because then you can just spam Rest and Rage and make sure everything is quiet, and then just get your multipliers based off of that. So that's probably the easiest way to go about it. And of course, we are negating ability Duration here. Duration is super useful for not only ability of Rest and Rage and Invisibility, but it's just useful for both of them just to keep the duration nice and high, so you're invisible for a longer period of time, and so that people just don't wake up. It becomes a pain if they wake up and then you have to recast the ability again, wasting more time and effort. It's just duration all the way, especially with this one. So we're adding more duration on here. We're adding on Molt Efficiency for more maximum duration as well. And we're adding on Hushed Invisibility, especially if you're trying to get a weapon like a ranged weapon or anything that has a loud explosion. Enemies will hear that, they'll become alerted. You want this on so that you can just add on more damage onto those weapons rather than having to put on a silence augment onto those weapons. Each of those weapons do have their own silence augment, but this works across the board for everything, so you don't have to particularly put on a silence mod onto that weapon to make sure that it's quiet. This makes sure that everything that you do is quiet so that you can peacefully get that affinity booster on top of that. So full range, maximum battery, efficiency, duration, more duration, and of course Prime Sure-Footed, just to make sure that we're just not getting knocked around, which is pretty much a standard at this point. If you are doing Loki, I do recommend for your Crimson Archon shards to have more ability duration, and maybe even to have 2 for just casting speed. This just kind of makes back for natural talent, just to give you some more casting speed, so you're not just standing there all the time having to cast both invisibility and Rest and Rage. It makes sure that you're more out on the table being able to kill things rather than spending most of your time trying to cast both of those abilities. So across the board, just having fast casting speed, super efficient, super range, super duration, trying to keep as much duration as we can, and that's pretty much it. There isn't really much else to it other than killing people after that point. Switch teleport, here we are focusing on switch teleport for our Eidolon runs. If we're trying to get those hacked drones, trying to get them across the field as quickly as possible, we need as maximum range as we can here. We're using overextended stretch, auger reach, and cunning drift for the maximum range at 280% bonus range. Prime flow for maximum energy, guardian, arcane guardian, because Plains of Eidolon is pretty tanky and you do need to get a little bit more damage reduction. Arcane Energize, more energy. Umbral Vitality, making sure we just don't go down. Affinity, why this doesn't have any of the Umbral mods is because we won't get hit. It'll be so quiet we won't get hit. So that's really useful. But for Switch Teleport, we definitely want to make sure that we are going Umbral Vitality and Umbral Intensify just for added health and a little bit of added power strength. It's not too real necessary though. You could actually go shields because really nothing here goes off of power strength now that I'm thinking about it, other than maybe radial disarm, but still it's not super useful to have Umbral Intensify. You could go anything other than that, adding even on some shields just to make sure that you can survive a little bit longer. Prime Sure-Footed just to make sure we just don't get knocked down. But most of the time when I'm running this, I'm just speeding through missions, and of course Soul will usually pick a better Warframe that can actually handle all the high level enemies, so we can just speed run that mission. Especially when you encounter a drone, it becomes annoying that it moves at snail speed.
Yeah.
So this is really nice to just speed run that mission, and we really don't care too much about the mods here. So interesting. Invisibility, we are mainly looking at invisibility for the duration. We really don't care about anything else about range. We're not really looking for affinity here. We're mainly looking at invisibility. So we're adding on narrow-minded, prime continuancy for full duration, constitution, auger massage for basically more duration. Overall, we can swap out if we need to for multiple efficiency. That'll add a good 36% more ability duration. Prime flow for maximum battery. Hushed invisibility again if we're trying to go for affinity and we're by ourselves and we're being sneaky about it, then we can get some affinity off of that. Although the affinity build is definitely better because of Rest and Rage. It just makes sure that no one gets alerted at all. Vitality, again, we could have actually switched out Switch Teleport instead of having a strength here. We could be having a different mod like Primed Rejuvenation for shields. But again, Vitality here just to add on more health, make sure that we just don't die because of toxin damage. Toxin damage is kind of a butt.
Yep.
And then Prime Sure-Footed. If you haven't seen the Trinity video, it's nice not to get knocked down. But yes, and a corrosive projection, which I do favor my steel charge. But that's about it for the build. I think it's about time we try some affinity.
Yeah.
Yes.
I gotta get to my affinity build. There we go.
And for Loki, he is a very simple frame. It's very easy. And now if you are doing your Tenno, let's see here, operator. If you are doing your Tenno and you're trying to get your focus class, whether you have one of these 5 focus classes, Loki is very good at getting your affinity. So all you need to do is get a good lens. I would recommend getting a high enough lens, as most of our equipment and weapons have at least a 4 tier. I believe that's a Lua lens, if not even greater. But I believe that's a Lua lens.
I think it's a Lua lens.
Yeah, but using as high as a lens you can, because that just gives you more conversion for your focus. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Make sure you have a lot of energy restores, making sure that you just get your energy off right off the get-go. And then after that, it's pretty much just smooth sailing. Speedrun.
Speedrun.
It did not take that long.
Yeah.
But yes.
I have a lot of energy restores.
Oh yeah. And I actually got my focus classes up with just this, not even using Forma onto Loki.
I have 2 Forma onto Loki, but he's only level 24 because I forgot I ever put Forma on him.
But Molt-Efficiency, how this works is the longer your shields stay up at full maximum, the more duration you get off of it, which is perfect for everything that you're trying to do. And when you're using guns, you can shoot and you'll not alert anyone because of hushed invisibility.
Can't go that way.
It's all quiet.
It is very quiet.
But as you can see on the top right corner, I have full affinity. If you ever come across to Xmas, you want to go from behind. And most of the time you'll be able to take it out. Depends on your weapons, how well your weapons are. If they're good high damage or if they're not. If they're not, typically it won't take out something that high.
Yeah, no.
But you can also just completely ignore Xmas's if you know you're not going to kill them. The main thing is just staying as calm as a cucumber. As soon as you get your buffer, don't panic. You've got time and take your time killing things. Last thing you need is to panic. Whoops, I had someone. Because the last thing you need to panic and you accidentally reset your timer.
Yeah, no, we don't want that.
Yeah, you want to keep your ability buffer, your affinity buffer up.
$13,000.
Yeah. All right. We shall go.
We shall go.
After we kill a few more.
I killed an Xmas.
Whoa. Oh, because I have the grin locked for Arbiters of Hexes. That's
Oh.
why. Alright. We shall go.
We shall go.
Whoa! So, one thing definitely to take note of, if you are doing affinity, it's actually better to run solo than with a companion. You might think that it's better for affinity and especially for rest to be able to get more people across the board. It's actually just easier to have one person because if you accidentally have the second person trip the alarms, it gives one person a better idea of how the stealth is actually going, how people wake up, and especially it gives you more control over your environment versus having a second person and they individually, you know, maybe they trick the alarm or maybe something that you did that kind of goofs them up. So it's especially easier to just run it solo. And because you're running it solo, you have more enemies that you can go through and you can kill and you can get the affinity for versus having your companion killing those units for you and or taking some of that affinity. Because if you have an extra person, I don't know if the affinity is really gained or lost there, but just it's easier just to have one person, especially trying to control the area, trying to go through the area. I found that it's just easier just to do it solo and you just have more control over those areas. But yes.
Yeah.
But that is Loki. Not too much to him. It's not something that you would really use at high levels. It's mostly just for leveling up and trying to get yourself leveled up. And that's pretty much it. Loki, I wish there was a little bit more to his kit. There isn't really anything in terms of damage, and especially for his decoy, it does leave something to be desired. But yes,
I do not like his decoy.
yeah, it doesn't do too well. But yes, well, is that all the time we have for this episode?
Unfortunately, yes.
And we will see you guys in the very next video. Bye bye.
Bye bye.